Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Matt Knight, and I am joined today by news editor Thad Greenson and arts and features editor Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
How you doing, Matt?
How's everybody doing today?
Doing well.
All right. Well, we have a weirdly upbeat group of stories for you.
I know, it's going to be hard to take, but we'll just have to muddle through somehow.
We'll bring it way back down next week, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
We've got quotas to make.
Be careful what you wish for. So I think we'll start off with you, Jennifer, today, because you ostensibly have the cover story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's on the cover in the North Coast Journal this week?
Well, actually, the covers of the North Coast Journal, it is the Summer of Fun issue, which is our annual issue, sort of annual, except for last year. And it is the labor of love of Kali Kaziris, who is our calendar editor. And what she does is she sends out the call somewhere, a couple months back to everybody and anybody who's ever had a camp or a summer activity for kids. And then she pesters them, hunts them down, does what she has to do in order to get information on all the camps that are offered through the summer so that our wonderful audience can pick up the paper and find something, my God, anything to do with the kids this summer. This seems more crucial now that lots of us have had them home for an entire year without a break. So and for kids who are already back in school, already in contact with other kids, I think it makes sense to, want to find something to keep the activity going, especially, if you're working and you need, some place to bring your kids to keep them happy, keep them healthy, keep them entertained all summer. And so there's a big list, not as big as previous years due to COVID, but there's a big old list of camps all over the county offered by the city, offered by private organizations, some stuff even that's not necessarily a camp, but an ongoing activity like the Dispersed Sand Sculpture Festival, which is happening. All kinds of things that your kids can do. So peruse it, find something for them, and enjoy, go forth, wear sunblock.
Do you have a feel for how many of these are in-person type camps or kind of
the
a
majority? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the majority are. There are a couple things that are virtual, but most of it is in-person, distance, lots and lots of outdoor stuff. Mm-hmm. And, they've got their own procedures in place in terms of masking and things like that. So you can find out quite a bit and from reading it, but then there's information pointing you to websites and whatnot to get details.
Fabulous. It puts me in mind of Camp Irikana from my youth. But that's another story entirely. Well, thank you for that, Jennifer. So, Thad, vaccine surplus is your story this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, it's a bit of a rags to riches story, as the headline intones. Kind of caught wind of it last week during the weekly press conference with local COVID response officials. And Lindsay Mendez of the Vaccine Task Force just kind of mentioned in passing that the county was having some trouble with getting its shipment of COVID vaccine last week. And so this was on May 5th. And later that day, the county sent out a really upbeat press release about how they'd been able to procure 2 trays of the Pfizer vaccine, so about 2,400 vaccines from a facility in Fresno that the Fresno County Sheriff had actually airlifted up from their air unit, which I didn't know some sheriff's office have air units, but apparently Fresno does. And they were kind enough to fly this vaccine up here in a hurry. And so I just started thinking about, well, the county had kind of billed last week through the weekend as this kind of pretty pivotal week when they had more than 4,900 second doses scheduled. So that's, almost 5,000 people that were going to become fully vaccinated. That's about, 12% of the current number that we have fully vaccinated in Humboldt County. So it's a pretty big deal. And as I think most of our listeners know, the second vaccines, have to be given within a certain time frame from the first, or else they can't really, guarantee effectiveness. And so I just pictured this potential for this kind of cascade of cancellations and reschedulings that then would, impact the next group in line to get their second vaccines and everything. So started making calls last week and found out that the county indeed had not received the shipment, which was due. The state of California has shifted from distributing the vaccines itself and allocating vaccines itself to a third-party administrator. So they hired Blue Shield, the giant insurance company, to handle kind of all distributions and allocations throughout the state. And this has been phasing in for some time now, but it's fully in effect in Humboldt County now. And so the story as I got it is that Blue Shield just kind of made some change to the way counties make their allocation requests and orders. And there was just a miscommunication and a misunderstanding that wasn't limited to Humboldt County. It happened in other counties too, but about Humboldt County thought it had ordered 6,600 vaccines for last week, and Blue Shield thought it hadn't ordered any. And so it turned out kind of late Wednesday into Thursday, the county realized that the shipment wasn't just delayed, it wasn't coming. And so got on Blue Shield to try to find a workaround. Blue Shield kind of promised that it would make good on the shipment. And as we got further into Thursday, again, with the county having thousands of people lined up for these clinics over the weekend, officials just hadn't gotten tracking numbers for the shipments from Blue Shield and just didn't really have faith that these vaccines were going to show up. And so kind of launched an all hands on deck approach to trying to find vaccine anywhere they could. And from all accounts, Blue Shield was really instrumental in helping them do that. But they were able to track down, I think, 4 trays of Pfizer vaccine at a hospital in Monterey County that wasn't using them, and then called California Department of Public Health because there wasn't enough time to arrange kind of a third-party transportation of having FedEx or USPS ship these vaccine doses up here because there's cold storage, chain of custody issues, and everything is very regimented and has to be highly documented and stuff. But California Public Health, said, okay, we'll get somebody there to do the ground transportation for you. They rushed somebody up there, over to Monterey County and then 400 miles north to us, and got all these vaccines here in time by the time second dose clinics began on Friday. And then, wouldn't you know it, the original Blue Shield shipment showed up. And so all of a sudden, Humboldt County has just become awash in Pfizer vaccine, which is a wonderful problem to have at this moment in time, because I think today we're expecting that the CDC is going to give the final okay to start vaccinating 12 to 15-year-olds with the Pfizer vaccine, which is a huge step. And then, of course, opens up eligibility locally to thousands more people. So right as we're on the cusp of this new wave of demand, we have just thousands and thousands of doses of Pfizer in hand.
So would you call this the sort of handoff to Blue Shield? Do you think they've kind of fumbled it, or is it just the natural consequence of taking on something so big? Or it sounds like this is a statewide problem, not just us. Or
it has been a statewide problem. What happened last week was a statewide issue. It was experienced in multiple counties for sure. And as Blue Shield has taken over more and more of the state and more and more of this role throughout the state, there have been issues everywhere. Of course, there were issues before Blue Shield took it over too. So I don't know that it's a mistake or it's an issue of one party fumbling it, of Blue Shield or somebody else not doing what they're supposed to do. I think everybody needs to, as frustrating as it is sometimes, just kind of take a deep breath and realize this is a monumental effort, the likes of which we really have not seen, as far as trying to vaccinate millions and millions of people under a really tight time frame. With that, with especially as concerning Pfizer, with a vaccine that does have really onerous storage requirements. So unquestionably, balls got dropped, but I think if you're thinking about this effort in the grand scheme of things, it's only reasonable to think that balls will get dropped. The encouraging thing was I spoke to Megan Montgomery, who is kind of on the front lines for the COVID task force locally of procuring vaccines and making sure appointments get filled, and then asked the same question of our health officer Ian Hoffman during a press conference today. Just if they have confidence in this process moving forward, if there's reason for concern that something like this will happen again, and they both said that they're really confident that. Clearly, there was communication issues, and mistakes were made in this case. But they also pointed out that Blue Shield was then totally instrumental in helping Humboldt County find the vaccines we needed to make good on the appointments they'd scheduled. So I would say that's an encouraging sign.
Well, that's great. I also noticed in your article that there's some talk about alleviating vaccination settings restrictions.
Yeah.
So a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Currently, under the emergency use authorization that the federal government has given these vaccines, kind of a regulation that comes with that is they're not vaccines that can just be given in any setting like a normal flu shot or your polio vaccine or MMR or any of the other vaccines kind of we're accustomed to. They're required that they be given in kind of limited settings and only have authorized a certain group of healthcare providers or public health departments to do it. And so in Humboldt County, that means really the only entities that are authorized to give the vaccine are certain pharmacies that got federal authorization, and then Open Door, St. Joseph Health, Mad River Community Hospital, and Public Health. And so, and Redwoods Rural down in southern Humboldt. And so you can see that just really limits the number of entities that can provide these shots. And it means that for the average person who maybe has questions about the vaccine, they either have to take multiple steps of contacting their primary care provider or seeking out information and then booking one of these appointments at a mass vax clinic or at a pharmacy to get the shot. But they can't really just go into their doctor's office or their primary care provider's office and have that conversation and then decide at the moment, okay, yes, give me the shot. And they, as you would with the flu vaccine. When I go for, my regular wellness checkup or whatever, my provider asks if I want the flu shot. And we talk about it for a minute, and I either say yes, and they bring it in and stick it in my arm, or, I say no, thank you. But it's a decision that can be made on the spot. And so every barrier that's put up, whether it's transportation or whether it's being able to have those conversations and then immediately get the shot, having to schedule a secondary appointment, those are all, barriers that make it less likely that somebody's, even if they're, leaning toward getting it, that they're actually going to follow through and get that shot. So both Moderna and Pfizer have put in to get a full authorization of their vaccines. And that's a process that will take weeks. So this isn't happening overnight. But the hope from public health officials is that full authorization will come, and that will really, further reduce barriers and make, every healthcare provider and every pharmacy in Humboldt County able to carry the vaccine and basically give it on demand.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read a couple articles in the last couple of days about the so-called vaccine hesitancy that we've talked about here a couple times, in that some of this is not really all that much just hesitancy as a matter of convenience and a matter of scheduling for people. They're just too busy with just daily life and whatever burdens that they're carrying. And they just have not been able to find a good time or a good way to get to a scheduled clinic. And so it's like, kind of loosening up these restrictions is something that might help some of that help. These people get in and get the vaccine, the ones that do want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, moving forward, it will really take a kind of a multi-prong approach to getting all those folks, because you're right. I mean, the polling has been really, I think, really positive in showing that, yes, there is kind of a really small minority of folks who aren't going to get the vaccine, don't want it, have made that decision. But for the vast majority, they either have questions or there's these barriers. They're homebound, they live in a rural area, they can't get time off work. And so I think public health is really, shifting from kind of the mass vax effort to looking to reducing as many of those barriers as possible. So we're seeing mobile vaccine clinics. There's one out in Samoa this week. There's one down in Rio Dell last week. Officials say those are being really well attended. And then, you're also hearing more from public health officials like Dr. Hoffman urging, everybody who can to take little steps, like employers to offer their employees paid time off work to go get that vaccine. And things like that are super helpful.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, this is a process. I think we as Americans tend to be very impatient people and just want to snap our fingers and have it all happen instantly. But it's something that really does take time and just a building of it to get everybody vaccinated, everybody that wants it, that is. So.
There's also a comfort level, honestly, that develops over time. And I think we're seeing that in the polling, the public opinion polling about the vaccine, is that more and more people are saying that they've made the decision that they want to get the vaccine. And I think that has to do with, more time having elapsed from the first vaccines being given. And also just those people who maybe are on the fence, knowing more people in their personal lives who say, yes, I got the vaccine. I got it because, I wanted to protect my family. I wanted to do my part for the community. And I didn't have, side effects. I wasn't worried about long-term effects and those things. And I think those kind of one-on-one personal conversations really have a cumulative impact.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So Jennifer, let's turn back to you and let's talk about your article about goodness from the sea.
Yes, indeed. Do you remember when we used to have festivals?
Vaguely.
Remember? Yeah. So, well, the Arcata Bay Oyster Festival, which I know everybody still calls it Oyster Fest, but you know what? They've renamed it for the Arcata Bay that no one can point me to. And just like the airport, we're going to go with the real official name. The Arcata Bay Oyster Festival is on this year. Last year, you may recall, it was completely virtual. If you wanted to eat Oyster Fest oysters, you ordered them ahead, picked them up in, I think, were they in buckets? Anyway, you picked them up like the day before, and they came with, beer and wine or whatever, they sort of to-go packages. And then there was a 7-hour virtual experience that was hosted by Shoshana, who I talked to her the other day about plans for Oyster Fest this year, and she sounded like it was still going. She sounded exactly as energetic as when I logged on in the morning for that 7-hour thing, which I guess she just subsists on a diet of pixie dust, Red Bull, and glitter. And yeah, so she's so excited. She's going to be planning doing this whole 7-hour TV show again. With
love you, Shoshana, if you're listening.
Force of nature.
Did I ever tell you about the time I met her in the grocery store?
No, I don't think so.
I saw her from the back and I was like, is that Shoshana? And I was like, hey, Shoshana? And I kid you not, she turned and said, hi. And her skirts swirled around her and sparkled. And I think a cloud of glitter rose up. I was like, we're over here in the meat section. And it was shocking. But anyway, so she's going to burn it down once again with pre-recorded interviews with people who are producers in the oyster business. Last year, there were some great segments on the history of Humboldt Bay and on restoration of Tolowa Island. Ted Hernandez gave a great talk about native foodways and, oyster cultivation. And, there was just a lot to learn about the people who are out farming oysters, all the different, chefs and producers. There was a lot of tutorial on how to chef an oyster. You had no excuse for not shucking your own oysters after that whole presentation. They did a whole thing where the judges for the Oyster Fest went around to a handful of restaurants that were participating and judged on site. And then they announced the winners. They had streaming bands, and they're going to do all that again. But they are also going to have a hybrid approach, which is a thing where you would go to, let's say, like Six Rivers Brewing, for example. They might have a viewing party where you can go and watch it on the big screen like you would a football game or something like that, while ordering oysters and having a probably outdoor dining experience and sort of communing with your people from 6 feet away. Another option is the in-person option, which means that you would be reserving a table for your household and having a restaurant experience in an outdoor setting served by a participating Oyster Fest restaurant. And the cost of the service would be subsidized partly by Arcata Main Street, which is really interesting. So there are different levels.
Let me ask you this, Jennifer. So what exactly will the event look like then, as far as the physical event goes? What kind of footprint will it have?
That's still up in the air. The original plan was they were going to have that all happening on the plaza, like have 4 restaurants participating each on one side of the plaza. But that's a hard to control space because you need to be able to, in order to follow the state's guidelines for outdoor live events, you need to be able to say how many people are coming. You need to control traffic, etc. And I don't know if you've ever been on the Arcata Plaza, but it's not the easiest to control environment. So
No.
not so much. So yeah, so they're going to find some other locations in Arcata. There might be a place down in the Creamery or something like that. They're looking at a bunch of locations where they can do it. And depending on what they find, if it's a more controllable space, they might even be able to have, for example, live music on site. But again, those are reserved tables.
The idea is like sort of like the Three Stooges spread out.
Yes, exactly. So the only thing that wouldn't be happening this year would be a giant mob gathering of people roaming through the streets. We're not there yet. I talked to Nick Matthews about it.
Next year in Jerusalem, as they say.
Exactly. So next year on the plaza, that's, the hope. So Arcata Main Street president Nick Matthews was talking to me about it, and he was saying this is basically baby steps. And the 3-pronged approach that they're taking allows them to slowly move back to an in-person event. Although he thinks that we might just be seeing the virtual part forever. Since it does allow people, somebody from Minnesota can tune in and learn about, Humboldt oysters, which does have benefits for our area because we do ship them other places. I once saw them on a menu in Japan. So yeah, it was very good. I ordered them. But, the other thing that it allows Arcata Main Street is a certain amount of flexibility. So God forbid things go sideways and we end up in the purple tier again, and we can't have in-person gathering or restaurants close or something awful like that. It's not going to happen. Let me knock some wood there. But if that did happen, they still have a backup event. And if something happens where suddenly they, our COVID numbers go down to 0, then they can expand. Yeah, they can expand the hybrid experience and they can expand the in-person experience. So it allows a certain amount of flexibility. It also allows flexibility in terms of, of course, the people attending can choose. And it seems like everybody's making slightly different decisions about what they feel is safe, what they feel is comfortable as we, return to public life. But it allows the restaurants and businesses that Arcata Main Street's whole mission is to support to make decisions about how much they want to invest in terms of inventory, effort, etc. It used to be that getting a booth on the plaza to sell oysters, because you needed to be on the plaza in order to enter the best oyster contest, which could really boost your restaurant. So it was worth it to many. But just to be on the plaza with a booth, you got to pay $600 for a spot. Wow. And then you've got to have a tent. You've got to have whatever outside cooking equipment you need. You need a hand washing station. You need all the stuff that's going to get you approval, not only from the Department of Health, but from the fire marshal, because they're going to come around and make sure that your barbecuing setup doesn't set everybody on fire. So you had to do all this stuff, and then you had to staff your booth, let's say maybe like between 2 and 4 people if you're a small operation, for all day. And you have to pay those people, remember, because people work for money. So it's a huge investment to be on the plaza. And so, not everybody was ready to do it. But in this case, you can be serving as a restaurant for the live dining experience. You could be hosting a viewing party, right? And serving oyster specials and whatnot, and hopefully getting more business that way. With your regular restaurant staffing, or you could say just make sauce and have that in the featured takeout buckets. You have a lot of options, and the buckets are also going to focus on like swag and things like that. So there might be things that are non-food items. What they're really trying to do is pump up local business and get people in the mood and excited for Humboldt products. So, in that sense, I think that this can work. And, I had a second conversation with Shoshana in which she said to me, like, it's not perfect. Like, we're learning to do this. And truly last year, Arcata Main Street's festival was one of the few that wasn't canceled. And I mean that nationally. It was them and a couple of beer festivals that by that time in the year had decided to brave it and try virtual. And she was saying that, the farmers markets and the art markets have been kind of the only public gathering festival vibes that we've really gotten to enjoy this year. And so even though, yes, it's not going to be a big crowd, you are not going to be able to like gorge yourself sick, sunburn, and get drunk in the sun like you normally do. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe.
Sorry. Yeah.
So
that Oyster Fest burn.
Remind us of the date again for this.
Well, this is going to be on, I believe it's the 26th. And, she was saying that, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be like it's been every year, but, on June 26th, there's going to be stuff happening. And little by little at the farmers markets ahead of that all month, there are going to be, little announcements. There's going to be like an oyster calling thing. And she was basically saying, grab what you can, take what you can, and just kind of like carpe gatherings, because this is all it's going to be for a while. We don't know what's ahead. And so, even though it's a little weird, it's not, how it used to be. You got to enjoy what we have.
Words to live by.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. Well, that's just going to about do it for us this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is on newsstands and online right now. Get out there, get a copy for yourself and your family, and then keep entertained and informed. And we'll see you again next week, guys.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
See you next week.